Good evening. For the eagle-eyed amongst you, you will see Queenie, the Royal Enfield. Now, I've had a bit of trouble with trying to locate a shovel head motor for the shovel head build-off. And so in the meantime, I'm thinking, right, let's get on with stuff that actually isn't finished yet. So what I thought I'd do is give you a little bit of an insight and a rundown on the Royal Enfield build. Right, here we go. The story is, it's quite a strange story, but the story is, I'll put you down here so you can look at it like that. I built a frame for a Harley Davidson Sportster, but there was a bit of a problem. The jig that I used for my motor mounts has a back spine area that bolts in onto the jig that denotes where the rear master cylinder is. The rear cylinder is. Master cylinder. I built all the bottom half of this frame in the jig and then set my motor jig up, bolted it all in place, set the rear up, the section that tells me where the rear cylinder head goes, and I went home and had my dinner. I'm pretty sure it was spag bowl, but that's aside, with garlic bread, which was very nice. And then I came in the next day, and without rechecking my jig, the bit that I'd bolted in to tell me where the rear cylinder head was had crept down like this. So I carried on. I bent all the top half section in, quite happy with all of that. Then I bent all my rear section in, tacked it all in, and because my jig is a rotary jig, a rotisserie one, I could overweld everything. So I welded everything, did a final weld on everything. I then broke the frame out of the jig, put it on some wheels, was quite happy with it. Went to put in an engine, a mock engine, and it wouldn't fit. It was actually about 40 mil shy here. And what had happened was this part of the jig that told me where the rear cylinder head was had crept down overnight, and I didn't recheck it. So I'd bent it all to that section, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this engine wouldn't fit, so I threw a right hissy fit. Wanted to cry. I've just spent God knows how much 100 quids on this CDS tubing, which I use. Had a right hissy fit. Stripped the whole thing down, hung the frame up in the rafters up there somewhere and left it for a few weeks. I was just like, I was, sod it. I had to build another frame. I couldn't, if I hadn't have overwelded it all, I could have chopped that section out and put another section back in it. But I was too far gone. So then I had an epiphany one night, last lying in bed, sat bolt upright, and I thought, I'm just going to get another engine. I'll get another engine. A twin. I looked into getting the Triumphs, and the sump was too low on the Triumph engines for me to, just by looking at the pictures, the sump on the Triumph engines was too low. But then I saw that the sump on the Enfield engines, because I just kept Googling loads of twin engines, was quite shallow. And then I did some measurements on a friend of mine's shop in Letchworth who sells Royal Enfields. And I thought, it will go in. A motor will go in. The only thing I had to change was a little section here to bring the bar forward because it was too far back for a Sportster engine. So I just cut this section out, put a new section in, then made these engine mounts. And wallop, the thing went in. Brilliant. Looks really good. Was quite happy. Thought I'll do a carb conversion on it because I'm not a fan of fuel injection. Then I looked into getting whether I could get an ECU for a carb conversion. No, it was at the time. This is a year ago now. At the time, there was no carb conversion or ECUs running for this Enfield. The Enfield engines and the ECU setups on these are CAN bus. So then I thought, right, okay, that's all right. I'll sort it out. I'll wire it using the injection system. 4 days later, The wiring loom has gone in. 4 days later, we're trying to organise side stand switch because that's CAN bus and the solenoid. Starter solenoid there, that's all the ambient air temperature, the math sensor, the everything else. That all went in, and I managed to get it to run on brake cleaner through the throttle body. So I knew I had a spark, I knew I had timing, I knew I had everything. Everything was really good. So I broke the whole bike down, sent it off for paint and powder coat. In the meantime, the Sportster tank, which I wanted to run, there was no way that would take a fuel pump for a Royal Enfield. It's quite a big boss that sits in the bottom, and I wanted to run this peanut tank. So I thought, right, okay, I'm going to have to run an external fuel pump. So I ran an external fuel pump, and the pump that I'd got was only 2 bar, which is down there. 2 bar. It wasn't enough to put power behind the injectors. So I did a little bit more research, and I managed to get a 3.5 bar fuel pump, but then I needed an inline pressure relief switch, which was another problem that was a pain in the bum. But I've kind of got round that, other than the fact that I had to remake, I'm going to, hang on, I'll go wobbly. I had to remake these. Now these are the part of the injector rail that the injector sits in. So I had to make these up on the lathe, and then I had to retain them. So these buttons push down on the injector, and it retains the injector. Now the original fuel pump I was running in this mock-up oil tank, but the new fuel pump, this monstrosity here, has to run outside the fuel pump. I haven't made a bracket for this yet, but this runs outside the fuel pump. Fuel in, fuel up into the injectors, and there's the pressure relief valve, which I'm going to have to put in line here, which I haven't got yet. But it runs. The thing runs. Eventually it runs. I'll give you a run. Anyway, it was all born out of a mistake. Just knocked my tripod over. It was all born out of a mistake. But this is what it looks like now. And what I'll do, because the battery's gone flat, I've got to charge it. But what I'll do is I'll post a video of it running. I've got a few other problems as well, because this is where I'm going to have to put a relief valve in here, and then a feedback to the tank via this one here. So go to the pressure, to the injector rail, and then split off to a tank, return to the tank via the pressure relief valve. I've got to organise all that lot yet, so I'm way behind on this, trying to find an inline pressure relief valve, which I will get round to at the end. But in the meantime, this thing creates so much pressure without that valve in that it's bursting. It's bursting the little link pipe that's in here. So that's another problem I've got to get my head round. All things aside, the only thing that's left to do on this is to wire the lighting circuit up. I've put a little horn there and a dipper main beam switch and run it through the bars. This was at Bike Shed show, but I've got to put my hands up and say it wasn't actually running when it was at the Bike Shed show. I just ran out of time. It's called Queenie. Bless it. Gracie named it Queenie because it's a Royal Enfield. But that is it. That is the story behind this bike. And give me a couple of days. Give me the period over Christmas that we've got to go. And I will get my head round that and hopefully finish the wiring off for the headlights. And then hopefully we can do a little bit of a road test. Depending on the weather, because it's bloody freezing out there. There's lots of bespoke stuff on here. I've made my own footrests, levers. Still got to run the oil cooler because Enfield say, do not run this motor without an oil cooler. You will cook the engine. I've still got to get my hands on some lambda sensors. The ECU on these things are constant learning, so it needs these lambda sensors. But the wiring, everything's ready to go for the lambdas. I've just got to get them and plug them in. The only reason I've got these spark plugs in the hole is to stop flames from shooting out of here when it was running earlier. But I'll attach the video of this thing running, how we had it running earlier on. And then wish me luck over the next few days to try and get the rest of the fuel system and the wiring sorted out. And then we'll do a road test. Mint Queenie. Peace.